Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers out there. Lots of things happening in the business world. We begin with the Asian markets, and you can see it's all green. Particularly look at the Hang Seng, 1.7% gain over in Hong Kong. Goldman Sachs has put out a note upgrading Alibaba, saying that Alibaba's artificial intelligence intentions and their spending is basically going to give about a 40 or 45% upside on the stock. That's for Hong Kong. For the Kospi, which hits a new high, look at that, 2.88% over in Korea, 3,556. This was based on a deal that's been signed between OpenAI, Samsung and SK Hynix. SK Hynix and Samsung, of course, make chips. Samsung, of course, we all know, makes all types of electronics. But there was a big high-level meeting that took place in Seoul. And that was between Sam Altman of OpenAI, the president of South Korea, Jae Myung, and also Jae Lee of Samsung, Che Tae-hwan of SK Group, and Sam Altman. And so with this meeting that they had in Seoul was basically about OpenAI being able to make new data centers, or rather build data centers in South Korea. In fact, I even hear they signed an MOU with South Korea's ICT ministry, their digital economy ministry, basically in order to build more of these essential data centers. Take a look at a couple quotes from OpenAI in a statement that they put out there. They said these partnerships will focus on increasing the supply of advanced memory chips essential for next generation AI and expanding data center capacity in Korea. They also said, this is key here, this second quote is key, said this positions Samsung and SK as key contributors to global AI infrastructure and supports Korea's ambition to become a top 3 global AI nation. Who are the top 2? Everybody knows it's the US and it is China. OpenAI also completed a share sale in their company that values them at $500 billion. This basically is essentially OpenAI's employees, giving them shares that give them ownership in the company. They were allowed to sell out some of those shares to private investors. It was a $10 billion allocation. They only sold 6.6, meaning that the employees of OpenAI want to hold on to those shares because they believe that at one point, whenever the company becomes public, they will reap that benefit. $500 billion, to put that into perspective, is around the size of Netflix. Netflix is a market cap is about $509 billion. So, and this actually puts them ahead of Elon Musk's SpaceX, which is actually valued at around this much. It actually takes them a notch above SpaceX. So OpenAI is just signing big deals around the world. So we move on from there to the G7. The G7 is planning on seizing, or rather using the seized assets of Russia, about 140 billion euros worth, to give a loan to Ukraine. They've been talking about this, but there's some legal issues. Belgium has been holding back. Hungary has been holding back. But it looks like they're moving closer to that because, as you know, the U.S. is now selling weapons. The U.S. is no longer giving grants to the Ukraine or to Europe anymore for their weapons. Trump says it has to be a deal. So they are selling weapons, and the Europe is trying to fund the purchasing of those weapons to give to Ukraine. So they're looking at seizing, or rather monetizing assets that they've seized from Russia in order to do that. Russia, by the way, is going to retaliate. We understand that President Vladimir Putin is looking at selling off European assets that Russia holds. So companies in Europe that are still, if any of them are still doing business there, they want to actually seize those and then monetize those. So if you take from me, I take from you. So that, we see that continuing there. So that's in Europe. To the US, the shutdown has begun. We've updated this table here. President Clinton had 2 shutdowns back in the 90s. Obama had one in 2013. The last 3 are all Trump. In his first term, January 2018, December 2019, and then his second term, October of 2025. The markets, we talked about data that could be impacted by this shutdown. So jobless claims are due today. We may not get them. The non-farm payrolls tomorrow, we may not get them. Then CPI, retail sales, and PPI. So this is economic data that markets need in order to see how well or how the U.S. economy is faring. But the markets ignored it. The stock markets are like, look, you know what? At some point, they'll probably work this stuff out. New highs for the S&P 500 and I think even the Dow Jones. So all the markets in the U.S. closed in the positive region yesterday. And by the way, we did get one job data point from ADP, which is private sector payrolls. And September, they actually lost, the US on the private sector side lost 32,000 jobs. The forecast was a 51,000 job gain. August was initially 54,000 gain. It was revised to a 3,000 job loss. So on the private sector side, the US labor market is still showing some weakness, and that is going to give some cause for concern, but the markets still keep going up. Moving on from there, I think we'll round off now with Nigeria. Very healthy demand for Nigeria's September bond auction. The bonds, of course, are used for Nigeria's government to try to plug its deficit if it can, to borrow from the domestic market. Also, it's a portfolio option for you folks out there who are investing in stocks and money markets and so on and so forth. So basically, there's two bonds, a 5-year and a 7-year, that were reopened. They're not brand new bonds here. 100 billion naira is what was offered for each of them, so 200 billion total. 230 billion for the 5 years, what came in against the 100 billion that was offered. 1 trillion for the 7-year bond. So in total, 1.2 trillion. That's a 530% oversubscription, showing that there's still some really healthy demand. And the stop rates actually fell from 17% to 16% because, you know, there was a rate cut with the Monetary Policy Committee over at the CBN. And so investors are seeing, okay, if rates are going to start coming down with inflation decelerating and so on, let's lock in on a security like the 7-year bond and try to get rates there. So both well, like this, as far as the healthy demand for investor and securities for Nigeria. That is our updates for today.
Okay, so we're going to chance to talk today. Oh, good stuff.
Okay.
So
Very strange.
finally,
You're allowed to talk.
finally, a couple of things. So because we have a pile of topics that I really want to talk to you about. It's about the sale of TikTok. We never had a chance to talk about that. For me, I sense what is happening in America. I sense a tilt towards right-wing nationalism with the sale of that social media company, because what is happening is that Donald Trump is now giving it to Larry Ellison, which is a big MAGA. Also, part of the deal is Murdoch. Also, part of the deal is his son, David Ellison, which is Skydance. All right?
Yeah.
And Skydance has a big tilt, and he's been able to capture CBS.
Yeah.
So when you look at the fray of how the companies are going right-wing at a point in time like that, then you start to look and you start to jitter. Also, in it for him is the possibility of making a lot of money.
Yep.
You can see deals now going the way of companies like MGX that deals with crypto, that also invest in the same crypto company that Trump is benefiting from. So you can see a level of state capture.
You took the words right out of my mouth. State capture, that's right.
How Trump has become way richer by the American presidency than any time. Because when you check most of his valuation, even the Trump media company that has about $5 billion worth of his valuation that he has today, is because he's deliberately using Truth Social as the only channel of government. Which, when you look at it, I don't know the fine lines of that, but they might have to look at that properly.
Yeah.
So he's been able to take over. As regards the market, I'm sure the market is already used to the disorder of Trump. That's why they're saying, okay, the government shutdown, they're going to sort it out.
Yeah.
Because look at the man that has an antecedent of government shutdown. But the joke is on them now because the Republicans lead at this point in time. The other time that they had government shutdown, yes, okay, you will say, oh, it was when the Democrats were in charge of the House. But now it is the Republicans. But the interesting part about the government shutdown is that some of the payments will still go on. Payments like those on Social Security, about 74 million Americans on Social Security. So for those that argue that you don't need social buffers, if America, one of the most capitalist countries, say have about 74 million people on Social Security getting their check, how much more us? So I think that's a big argument for those that argue in favor of capitalism and say, don't help people on the lower rung. Rotus, that
I want to help people. I want to help people.
Was fired at you deliberately. As regards Sam Altman, it shows that that's the way of the world. Samsung industry coming into it, look at the valuation, 500 billion, goodness me. At some point, OpenAI's valuation, maybe
we'll get to a trillion, right?
Will be more than a trillion.
Yeah.
Because I do not see why it's not even more than a trillion already, because that's the future. Look at companies like NVIDIA. Today you saw them at very less valuation. All of a sudden, NVIDIA is one of the most valued companies in the world. So it shows where the world is going. Large language model, big data, that's where the world is going. That's where most of the investment in the world is going. Cryptocurrency.
Oh, yes.
That's where the investment of the world is going. That's why you see that. Look at the MGX, the Dubai fund recently set up as part of a sovereign wealth fund for Dubai government. See the investment they've made. See the cash out they've been able to make in a short time.
Oh, yeah.
So the question is, what are we doing in all of this? we as a country, where are we playing? I know, yes, it's a good time on the market, Rotus. How will people know oversubscribe?
Okay, you mean the bonds?
The bond market in
the
Nigeria.
bond market.
How will people know oversubscribe?
Yeah.
Because they are getting great figures. Where in the world are people getting 17% on bond markets?
I see what you're saying.
It's not that easy.
Right.
So Nigeria has given up a largesse in the bond market because we want to raise money also in the bond market. But also there's a downside to that. The private sector has been crowded out. That's another thing, the bond market really. So when the government says, okay, we are oversubscribed on the bond market and they're starting kumbaya, the private sector is also being crowded out in this market. And also, there's an interest you pay. Because on this bond capital, it's not just free.
Right.
I subscribe to a couple of the treasury bills and the T-bills and the FGM bonds, although lower cycle ones. But you would see to a large extent that there's also a downside to all of this.
Fair point.
All right, going to Europe and Russia. Of course, with Donald Trump cutting funding to Russia, cutting funding to Ukraine, and also weapons, sales of weapons to Ukraine, they have to raise money to the Europe, which has steadily and continuously supported Ukraine, have had to find a way to raise money to loan Ukraine. Now, what they've done is saying that, like you mentioned, foreign assets, especially Russian assets, have been seized since the advent of this war, will be used as a loan. I think it's important to mention that even though Russia has hit back, that they're using to fund the loan. And if Russia pays war reparations, in the event that they pay war reparations, then Ukraine will pay back the loan. So this is set to fund. And of course, a number of European countries are happy about this deal because, about this move, potential move, because then it would take off the pressure on a number of them that are either heavily in debt, like France, or they've divested their funds, are not able to fund Ukraine at this particular time. What some countries like Belgium would say then would be that it puts them in a difficult position, especially Euro single currency, as they still share some, do business with Russia at some level, some levels. And I'm thinking perhaps this should be applied to some assets of our leaders here. Maybe they can be repatriated back home to fund some critical infrastructure. And I hear, Rotus, that the EFCC has actually started something like that. That there have been some private deals done with some, some people who have looted money, and part of that money has been used to pay civil servant salaries, even here in Nigeria. So maybe we should look at deepening that a little bit, so that rather than the monies, asking people to come and we are going after cases that never have, seem to see the light of day, let's take back these funds and actually plow it back to the lives of people most in need, as the European Union is looking to do with Russia. I don't know to what extent that would succeed, but it looks like a number of their countries, member countries, are supporting this. A few of them iffy about it, not very sure about it, but this might be the solution to funding for giving the loan to Ukraine, to fund the war, or for Ukraine to beat. But another thing might be, with Trump's turnaround at the UN with regards to his position on Russia and Ukraine, and saying that Ukraine could potentially even win this war, maybe he might change his mind around funding or giving funds or providing funds to Ukraine. Let's watch what happens, and either would put a little pressure on Russia to finally come to the negotiation table, and maybe we might see an end to this war or to this invasion of Russia in Ukraine.
Okay, again, let me start from the local to the global. Now, starting from the local, in Osun State, they seem to be running a funny monkey business in their market, and it's tied to politics. Now we're told that the local government, former local government chairman in the, former dispensation in that state, 30 local governments, they are now giving orders to banks, what they call irrevocable order of deduction, which is to say that, look, whatever deduction is going to be made from their accounts should be paid to the old order. Whereas there is an order in place from the Federal High Court, from the Court of Appeal. The matter is also pending in the Supreme Court. And there have been allegations by attempts to politicize local government markets in Osun State. What the local government chairman in the 30 PDP local governments have done now is to appeal to the Inspector General of Police. I think what we can say in this regard is that the rule of law should be maintained, should be respected. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who has been a champion for federalism and for the rights of the states and the local councils should personally look into this matter. Particularly a document that is circulating from Boluwaduro local government in Osun State, claiming to collect money that is not due to it and also against the run of law. Now, still talking about markets. In the United States, now the markets seem to have shrugged off whatever the shutdown is all about. The shutdown, which took effect yesterday, Wednesday morning, is likely, we are told, to last for about 11 days. But the markets, the prediction markets, poly market and Kalshi, they are telling us that it could in fact run till about middle of October. What are the issues? One, workers will be followed. In 2018, about 850,000 workers were followed. This time, the projection by Kashi and Poly Market is that about 850,000 will be followed. Now, two, President Trump is threatening that, in fact, some workers will go on a permanent sack because of this. Simply because the Democrat leaders, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and the leaders of the Republican Party could not reach an agreement. What is the basic issue? Extension of enhanced Obamacare tax credits. So you have, on one hand, Jeffries and Kamala Harris, and also the Republicans on the other side, disagreeing and trading blames. Whatever happens, however, the major damage will be about economic data. That's why when you were speaking, Rotus, you were talking about non-farm payrolls due on Friday not coming up. Also, the Federal Reserve will be affected. The Federal Reserve is supposed to do a rate cutting October 15, but that also we're not very sure of. The basic activities about mail delivery and all of that would happen. But federal workers are the ones who are going to suffer. Meanwhile, the market is doing well. S&P 500 has reached over 6,700. It's a record high this year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is doing well. All the major indexes are doing very well. The Asia Pacific market is also doing well. That's why the father today, the Chinese market, the Hong Kong market are closed for public holiday. But generally, the markets, the investors seem to be shrugging off what is called the September curse. Somehow, we survived the September curse. Anyway, thank you very much, Rotus.
All right. Thank you very much, Rotus.